It was a quiet October evening. Rain tapped the windows in soft rhythms, and the house hummed its usual emptiness. Elena stood in the living room, folding a blanket that still carried the faint scent of cedar. She had grown used to silence, 7 years of it. But tonight, silence broke. From the kitchen, a familiar voice called her name. Elena. Her body froze. The blanket slipped from her hands. She waited, the seconds stretching long and brittle. Again, the same voice, steady, warm, unmistakable. "Elena, come here." Her heart tripped against her ribs. No, it wasn't possible. Not after all this time. Not after the accident, the funeral, the cold hands she'd kissed goodbye. But the voice came again, softer now. Like he was only a few feet away. "Dinner's ready." Elena stepped forward. The lights flickered. The air thickened with a faint trace of aftershave she hadn't smelled in years. She whispered his name. "David?" And the house exhaled, as if it had been holding its breath. Elena stepped into the kitchen. The air was colder, sharp like metal. The hum of the refrigerator sounded wrong. Too deep, too slow. Her phone still glowed on the counter. Missed call. "David home line." She picked it up. The line was dead, yet faint static whispered through. "Dinner's ready," repeated softly, looping like a broken memory. Her pulse thundered. "Who is this?" she demanded. The voice paused. Then, laughter, the kind only David had, warm and teasing, echoing through her skull. Her knees weakened. She dropped the phone. It clattered against the tile and slid beneath the table. Elena pressed her palms against the counter, breathing hard. Her reflection in the dark window looked younger again, her hair darker. "Eyes alive. This isn't real," she whispered. But the smell of rosemary and burnt toast filled the air, their last dinner together. Somewhere behind her, a chair creaked. Elena crouched to grab the phone, but her hand met something cold. Metal slick with condensation. She pulled it out. The phone was wet, dripping. The smell of river water clung to her fingers. Her breath came fast. That same smell. The one from the night they found his car in the ravine. The kitchen lights flickered again, long shadows rippling over the tiled floor. From the table came another sound. 3 slow knocks spaced perfectly apart. Elena backed away. "David, stop it. Please." The old clock ticked louder. Every tick matched her heartbeat. A whisper rose through the static on the phone. "You never said goodbye." She clutched the counter's edge. "I did. I watched them close the coffin." Silence. Then, "Not to me." She stumbled back toward the hallway, but the door had vanished. In its place, wallpaper she hadn't seen in years. Cream with pale blue vines. The same pattern they'd had when they first bought the house. Her throat tightened. "No?" she whispered. The kitchen had turned into a photograph, frozen in their first summer together. The old radio sat on the counter, playing faint jazz from nowhere. And then he was there. David? Or the idea of him, leaning against the counter, smiling as though he never left. "Elena," he said softly, "you kept everything the same." Her tears fell before she noticed. "You're not real." He smiled wider. "Neither are you. Not here." Her hand reached out and passed straight through him. The radio snapped off. The sunlight vanished. The house fell back into night. Elena was alone again. Only the faint ring of a dial tone filled the silence. Long, endless. She followed it to the old landline mounted on the wall. It was off the hook, though she hadn't touched it in years. She lifted it slowly to her ear, static. Then a single word whispered through the void. "Kitchen." Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. "David, what do you want?" she cried. The whisper returned. Softer now. "Come home." The line went dead. The clock stopped. Outside, the rain turned to thunder, echoing her heartbeat. Elena slid down the wall, clutching the receiver to her chest. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't sure if she was alone, or if she had finally answered the call she'd been waiting for. Morning brought no peace. Elena sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. Sunlight crept across the floorboards, but it felt foreign. Too bright, too awake. The kitchen looked ordinary again, every shadow in its right place. And yet, the phone still lay on the counter, off the hook, cord twisted into a perfect spiral. She tried to laugh. Maybe it had been a dream, a hallucination. 7 years of grief finally cracking the walls. But when she turned toward the sink, she froze. The teacup, the cracked one, was whole again. She stepped closer, fingertips trembling over porcelain that should have been broken. In the reflection of the cup, she saw him, David, standing behind her shoulder. Not a ghost this time, but clear as daylight. When she spun around, there was only air. By afternoon, the laughter began. At first, soft, like echoes underwater. Then louder, clearer. Elena turned off the radio, but it continued. She followed the sound into the hallway. Each step she took, the voice seemed to retreat. Playful, teasing. You're getting warmer, it said, like a memory mocking her. She found herself at the basement door, the one she hadn't opened since the funeral. Her hand hovered over the knob. If this is real, she whispered, show me. The air grew colder. The laughter stopped, and from below, a single note of the piano played itself. Their song, the one they danced to the night before his death. Her hand trembled as she turned the handle. The basement smelled of dust and rainwater. Boxes lined the walls, their wedding photos, his old vinyls, her letters she could never throw away. The piano sat in the center, its keys yellowed, a single one pressed down on its own. The note vibrated endlessly. Impossible. She touched it. The sound stopped. Silence. Then, from behind her, David's voice, calm, close. I never left, Lena. She turned. Nothing. Just the hum of an old bulb swinging gently from the ceiling. Her throat tightened as tears blurred her sight. Then why can't I see you? She whispered. The bulb flickered once, then twice, and on the third flicker, his outline appeared in the light. The figure dissolved before she could speak. Elena fell to her knees, clutching the piano's edge. Her fingers pressed random keys, dissonant, frantic. You're not here, she said through tears. You're gone. But her words didn't echo in the room. Instead, another voice. Hers repeated them from the shadows, delayed by a heartbeat. You're gone! You're gone! She stood, trembling. Stop! She shouted. The echoes stopped instantly. In the heavy silence that followed, the cracked teacup upstairs shattered again. And then the phone rang. She rushed upstairs, following the ringing. Each step she took seemed to echo twice, one real, one delayed. When she reached the kitchen, the sound cut off. The phone sat on the counter again, receiver lifted, line open. Elena, the voice said, calm, familiar, impossibly near. She swallowed hard. What do you want from me? A pause. Then the truth. The line went silent. The lights flickered once more, revealing the teacup shattered in the sink, water running over it like tears. And for the first time, Elena felt something new beneath the fear. Guilt, rising like a tide she could no longer deny. She whispered, what truth? But the line was dead. Only her own breathing answered back. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind the heavy stillness of early dusk. Elena sat at the kitchen table surrounded by silence, staring at the broken teacup she had tried to glue back together. Each piece refused to stay, as if the porcelain itself rejected mending. She didn't notice when the radio clicked on by itself. Soft static at first, then a tune she hadn't heard in years. Their song. The one that played the night he died. Her breath hitched. David? From the far end of the kitchen, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then he stepped forward. Clear, real, breathing. Breathing! His eyes the same warm brown she remembered, though something behind them felt still. "Elena," he said, smiling faintly. "You kept my seat warm." Her body trembled. "You can't be here." He tilted his head, almost hurt. "Then who's been calling?" She rose slowly, half expecting him to vanish if she moved too quickly. "Why now?" she whispered. David smiled. "You finally listened." The words made no sense, yet they struck something deep in her chest. "You're not real," she said, more to herself than him. "Real enough to miss you," he murmured, taking a step closer. The floorboards didn't creak beneath his feet. Elena felt warmth spread across her skin, the same warmth she used to feel when his hand brushed hers. Tears welled up. "You're just what I want to see." "Then don't look away," he said softly. For a moment, she didn't. The world seemed to tilt. She blinked, and suddenly it was night again. Candles flickered where lamps had been. The radio hummed with white noise. David sat at the table now, fingers tracing the rim of the repaired teacup, perfectly whole again. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. David looked up. "You will. You just have to remember." "Remember what?" "The night by the river." Her throat closed. That night. The argument, the slammed door, the headlights disappearing into rain. "No," she said. "Don't make me." He smiled sadly. "You already did." She turned away, gripping the counter for balance. "You're not him." He wouldn't do this. Behind her, David spoke, his tone quiet, unchanging. "You said you wanted one more dinner together." She froze. "How do you know that?" His voice was almost tender. "Because you said it while I was dying." Elena's breath caught. Her reflection in the dark glass blinked. But she didn't. The reflection smiled faintly. "You never said goodbye," the image whispered. Her body went rigid. The reflection stepped back while she stayed still. "Stop it," she screamed, slamming her fist against the counter. The lights flickered violently, and the candles went out. When the lights steadied, the kitchen was empty again. No David, no sound. Only her reflection, no longer smiling, but watching. Elena slid to the floor, her back against the cabinets. She clutched the teacup's broken handle she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The air smelled of river water again. Her mind reeled through fragments. Headlights, his voice shouting her name. The wheel jerking. "It wasn't my fault," she whispered. But the reflection mouthed different words. Through the window, the darkness rippled. Not wind, not rain, but movement. She crawled forward, pressing her hand to the glass. For one impossible second she saw David outside, standing in the garden, smiling the way he used to. Then he raised his hand and pointed straight toward her, and the phone began to ring. Days began to blend together. Elena no longer opened the curtains. She didn't answer calls from her sister, didn't check the mail. Every sound in the house became a signal. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the chair, the soft buzz of the light. Each night at exactly 8:17, the phone would ring, and each night she answered. "David," she would whisper. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes it was only static. But even silence felt like company. The kitchen had become a shrine. His photos, his old mug, the chair she kept pulled out as if he'd just stepped away. One evening, when she picked up the phone, she heard him laugh softly. "You look tired," he said. "You should rest." Her voice broke. "I can't. You might stop calling." Outside, autumn passed into winter without her noticing. Dust gathered on the windowsills. The air smelled of wax and stale coffee. David's voice had grown clearer. "You don't need them," he would say. "They don't understand." Elena would nod, tears sliding down her face. "I just want to be where you are." "Then come home," he whispered through the receiver. The words echoed in her head long after the line went dead. She began lighting candles around the kitchen, the way he liked. Sometimes, when the light wavered, she swore she saw him sitting in his chair, eyes fixed on her, patient, waiting. She whispered to the empty air, "I'll find you." And the flame trembled as if in reply. Nora came to visit one afternoon. She stood in the doorway, stunned by the sight of the house, curtains drawn, candles burning, photos lining every surface. "Helena," she said gently, "you can't live like this." Elena smiled absently, eyes on the empty chair. "He comes at night. You just can't see him." Nora's face fell. "He's gone. You need help." Elena turned sharply. "Don't say that. Listen to yourself," Nora pleaded. "This isn't David. It's your grief." The phone rang. Elena rushed to answer it. She pressed it to her ear, nodding, eyes filling with tears. "He says he can hear you," she whispered. Nora backed away, heartbroken. "Then tell him goodbye," she said, and walked out. After Nora left, the silence deepened. The house felt heavier, denser. That night, David's voice came softer, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have let her in." Elena pressed the phone to her cheek. "She doesn't believe. She doesn't know." "She'll take you away," he warned. "And then I'll be alone again." Her voice broke. "I'll never leave you." Outside, wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows like 1,000 unseen hands. Elena sank to the floor, clutching the receiver, whispering promises to the empty line. She would prove her love. She would never leave. The candles flared as if fed by invisible breath. Days later, Nora returned with the police. But by then, the house was silent again. They found Elena asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by melted wax and photographs. The phone sat off the hook, humming faintly. When she woke, she smiled. "You just missed him." The officer exchanged a look with Nora, pity heavy in their eyes. They left her with a warning, a promise to check in. But as soon as the door closed, Elena turned to the receiver. "I told you I'd never leave," she whispered. The voice on the other end whispered back, "And I'll never let you." The line went dead. The kitchen light flickered once, then every photo on the wall turned face down. The first sign came quietly. One morning, Elena woke to find the phone cord torn from the wall. Yet, that night at 8:17, it rang again. She lifted the receiver, only to hear her own voice on the other end. "You shouldn't have lied." She froze. "Who is this?" The voice repeated, identical in tone. "You shouldn't have lied." Her stomach twisted. She dropped the receiver, but it kept speaking from the floor, her voice looping like a recording she never made. As the words repeated, she began to remember the fight by the river. How she'd screamed, how he'd turned the car and she'd walked away. The sound of brakes, the crash, her voice echoing in the rain. The words on the phone grew louder. "You shouldn't have lied." And finally, she whispered, "I did." She couldn't bear the sound anymore. Elena tore the cord completely free and hurled the receiver into the sink. The impact shattered it, yet the line still hummed faintly. And then she heard something new, a whisper layered beneath the hum. Words she'd never noticed before. "Come down," it said. Her eyes widened. The basement. She descended the steps slowly, every creak a heartbeat. The smell of river water grew stronger. At the bottom, the piano waited, one key pressed down again. Beside it sat the cracked teacup, but now something glinted inside. A small recorder, blinking red. She pressed play. Her own voice filled the basement, the night of the accident, shouting, "Get out of the car!" Then David's voice, softer, pleading, I'm sorry. A splash. Silence. The recording ended, but the air remained heavy. She whispered, "It was my fault." Then, a new voice. Clear and near. "Now you remember." She turned. David stood in the corner, no longer a phantom of warmth, but pale, drenched, his eyes hollow. Water dripped from his sleeves, pooling at his feet. "Why?" she asked through tears. "Why haunt me?" David's expression softened. "I didn't. You did." Her knees gave out. "I called you back." He nodded. "And I came. But it's not me you've been talking to." She shook her head. "No, it's your voice. It's you. It's what's left of you," he said. "The part that never forgave yourself." The walls groaned. Water trickled from the ceiling, running over the piano keys. The room darkened as if the river had returned to claim her. David's voice grew distant. "You have to let me go." She crawled forward, reaching for him. "I can't." "You already did," he said gently. "You just never forgave it." The water rose to her knees. Reflections rippled, doubling her face. One crying, one calm. "I didn't mean to leave you," she sobbed. "I know," his voice replied, softer than the rain. "But I can't stay where guilt keeps me." As his outline began to fade, the water receded, leaving her alone on the cold, wet floor. When she woke, the basement was dry. The recorder, the teacup, the water, gone. Only silence remained. She climbed the stairs, her body heavy with exhaustion. In the kitchen, the clock ticked again. 18. Elena smiled faint. For the first time in years, it had moved forward. The phone sat on the counter, reconnected somehow, the cord neatly coiled. It didn't ring. It didn't hum. She placed the receiver gently back in its cradle and whispered, "Goodbye." Through the window, dawn began to break, and somewhere in the distance, faint, almost kind, she thought she heard a final voice. "Thank you." But she didn't answer. She didn't need to. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Elena moved through it slowly, as if waking from a long dream. Every photograph now faced upright again. Yet all the faces were blurred. The kitchen door creaked open on its own. She froze. "No more," she whispered. "You're gone." From the shadows, a voice that was almost David's, deeper now, colder, answered, "You brought me back. You don't get to end this." The air thickened. Every light in the house flickered, each one pulsing to her heartbeat. Elena steadied herself. "You're not him. You're what's left when love rots." The voice laughed, not kindly. "Then what does that make you?" Her answer came quiet but clear. "Free." She walked to the phone. That faithful, cursed thing, and lifted the receiver. "Who are you really?" she demanded. At first, only static. Then, her own voice answered, "You know." The reflection in the window wavered. It wasn't her face anymore. It was his, smiling faintly, lips moving in perfect sync with the words from the phone. Elena set the receiver down carefully. "You can't live in my house anymore." "This isn't your house," the voice replied. "It's mine." The kitchen light flashed once, and every cabinet door slammed open at once, plates clattering to the floor like white shrapnel. Elena didn't flinch. "Then take it. I'm done." The house groaned. A low, living sound that rattled the floorboards. Elena stepped back as the walls shimmered, turning translucent, revealing flickers of memory beneath the plaster. The river. Headlights. His hand reaching for hers. She whispered, "This is where you died." The voice replied from everywhere at once. "This is where you kept me. I didn't know how to let go." "Then learn." She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, for the first time in years. Fully. The lights flickered again, softer now. When she opened her eyes, the apparition had stepped closer, its edges glowing faintly like embers fading in the dark. She said, "I forgive you." The air trembled. "And I forgive myself." The voice wavered, losing form. "If you let me go," it said softly, "I'll fade." She smiled through tears. Then fade. The light flared. Pure white, swallowing the room. Every object blurred, as if the house itself exhaled. The hum that had haunted her for years dissolved into silence. When the brightness receded, the kitchen stood empty. The chair, the phone, the teacup, all there, but still ordinary, lifeless. Elena sank to her knees, hands trembling. She whispered into the quiet, "Goodbye, my love." No answer came, but for the first time, the silence didn't frighten her. The next morning, the house was utterly still. No ringing phone, no flicker of light, no echoes of a name. Elena opened every window. Cold air swept through the rooms, carrying dust and memory away. On the counter sat the old recorder, silent and dark. She picked it up, smiled faintly, and placed it in a box with the photographs. When she stepped outside, the sun hid her face, blinding and clean. The world smelled like rain and earth. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm home." Inside, the kitchen light remained off, but for a brief moment, as she walked away, the reflection in the window, just for one heartbeat, smiled back at her, before vanishing forever. A week passed before she could stand in the kitchen without expecting the phone to ring. Now the space felt smaller, lighter. The air no longer hummed. The smell of candle wax had faded, replaced by sunlight and lemon soap. Elena brewed coffee, the first cup she'd made for herself in years. When she sat at the table, the empty chair across from her looked ordinary again. Wood, scratches, nothing more. She lifted her mug. "For both of us," she whispered. For the first time, her own voice didn't echo back. She began to notice the small sounds of life again. The creak of wood, the whir of the kettle, the world breathing around her. No voices, no static, only peace. That evening, she found an old answering machine stored in a drawer. She plugged it in out of curiosity. The screen blinked one message. Her pulse quickened. Slowly, she pressed play. A single voice, David's, filled the room. "Hey, Lena, if you're hearing this, it means I forgot my keys again. I love you. See you soon." She smiled through tears, letting the words play twice before pressing stop. Then she whispered, "Goodbye, David," and meant. That night, she dreamed of him for the first time without fear. They were in the garden, the river a whisper far away. He stood under the old oak tree, smiling the way he used to, alive, unburdened. "Are you happy?" she asked. He nodded. "Now that you are." When she reached for his hand, her fingers met light, not flesh. It didn't hurt. She woke with tears on her cheeks and sunlight spilling across the bed. In the morning, she packed a small suitcase. The house had been her prison and her chapel. Now it was simply a house again. Before leaving, she placed the repaired teacup, whole at last, on the windowsill. "Keep watch," she said softly. As she stepped outside, wind lifted through the open door. For a heartbeat, the faintest echo of laughter followed her. Not haunting, not sorrowful, just familiar. She smiled. "You always did hate goodbyes." She walked down the path to the gate, gravel crunching softly underfoot. The sky stretched wide and endless above her. For the first time, she didn't look back. Somewhere behind her, the house stood silent. No voices, no echoes, no calls, only the faint hum of life returning to its ordinary rhythm. As she reached the end of the path, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Unknown number. She hesitated, then smiled and let it ring. The call went unanswered, fading into stillness. And with that silence, the story of her haunting finally ended.